On the morning of August 26, a catastrophe unfolded along the Nepal-Tibet border. A wall of water, mud, ice and rock tore down a Himalayan valley, sweeping away homes, roads, bridges and vehicles. By the following day, authorities had confirmed at least 273 deaths across Nepal and Tibet, while more than 1,300 people were still missing. The numbers were changing as rescuers reached isolated areas and compared separate lists. This is the story of what happened, and why a disaster that began high in the mountains became a catastrophe hundreds of kilometers downstream. The worst-hit corridor runs through Nepal's Rasuwa district, around Rasuwa Gadhi, Timur and Siamrubesi, along the Bhote Koshi river system. The river originates near the border with Tibet. It then flows into the Trishuli system, carrying whatever is released upstream through narrow valleys, where settlements, roads and hydropower projects sit close to the river. Around 8:40 in the morning, the flood struck. Preliminary satellite analysis showed that a substantial portion of a glacier, or ice and rock mass, had collapsed high above the valley. The collapse sent ice, rock and sediment into the river system. The exact sequence is still being investigated. One leading explanation is that the collapse temporarily blocked the river, allowing water to build up before the barrier failed. The result was a sudden surge carrying enormous amounts of debris downstream. The event was initially confused with an earthquake. A magnitude 4.4 earthquake was reported in early accounts, but the United States Geological Survey later concluded that the seismic signal was generated by the landslide and collapse itself, not by a separate earthquake triggering the flood. That distinction changes the story. This was a cascading mountain hazard. Unstable ice and rock collapsed, the river was obstructed, and a rapidly released mixture of water, mud and boulders accelerated down the valley. Farther downstream, the scale became clear. Reports said about 40 kilometers of road were badly damaged, and at least 19 bridges were washed away along the affected corridor. Power infrastructure and hydropower projects were also hit. The water did not behave like an ordinary river flood. It carried huge quantities of sediment and rock, turning the flow into something closer to liquid concrete. In the Trishuli Basin, river levels reportedly rose by as much as 9 meters in roughly 30 minutes. Communities downstream had little time to react. Rescue operations were immediately complicated by the destruction of the very roads and bridges needed to reach survivors. Helicopters were used to search valleys and deliver emergency supplies, while soldiers, police and local responders searched through mud and debris. Among the missing were foreign tourists and pilgrims traveling toward the sacred Mount Kailash and Lake Mansarovar region. Nepal reported hundreds of missing foreign nationals, while Chinese authorities reported hundreds more missing in Tibet's Gyirong county. Because the two countries were collecting information separately, the totals changed repeatedly. And the danger did not necessarily end with the first flood. Chinese authorities warned about a swollen, partially dammed lake upstream that could create another release if it breaches. Rainfall and unstable slopes could make rescue work even more dangerous. The disaster has also renewed a much bigger debate about the Himalayas. The region is warming rapidly, and glaciers and high-altitude slopes are becoming increasingly unstable. Scientists say warming can increase the risk of glacier-related floods, landslides and rockfalls. But there is an important distinction. Scientists have not established that climate change alone caused this specific collapse. The exact trigger is still being studied. What this disaster does show is how connected the Himalayan landscape has become. A collapse thousands of meters above a valley can destroy infrastructure far downstream in minutes. And a border does not stop a river, a landslide, or a flood. For the families still waiting for news, this is not a story about satellite images or geology. It is about people who disappeared in minutes, communities that lost homes and livelihoods, and rescuers still searching through enormous fields of mud. The final toll is not yet known. But one thing is already clear. On August 26, the Himalayas released a force that overwhelmed communities on both sides of one of Asia's most important mountain borders. And the search for survivors, and for answers, continues.